strategy to develop eBooks. I'm Scott Abel. We're broadcasting live today from Hotel Zoso in Palm Springs, California. If you'd like more information about the hotel, you can learn about it at www.hotelzoso.com. Actually, today we're doing a little flip-flop. Instead of me being the interviewer, which I traditionally am, today I'm the guest on the show, and my interviewer will be Don Bridges from Data Conversion Lab. Don, are you on the line?
Yes, I am, Scott. How are you in lovely Southern California?
I am doing great, thank you. And where are you broadcasting from today?
Well, I am in, of all places, Albuquerque, New Mexico, but I was in your backyard at Dodger Stadium this past weekend, and that's me on the left, and former New York Yankee great Don Mattingly on the right. So Don and Don say hello.
Hey, all right, excellent. So before we get started, I'll let you do a quick little update to people who aren't familiar with your company. What is Data Conversion Laboratory, briefly, and what kinds of services do you provide?
Well, Data Conversion Laboratory is a 30-year-old privately held company that converts data from almost every kind of format to almost every kind of text format. Certainly, XML is where most people are going to. If you go to our website, which is DCLab.com, you can learn all about it.
Excellent. So we got a special treat for everybody today, courtesy of DCL, or Data Conversion Laboratory, and also the Content Wrangler. We've arranged with Ann Rockley and Charles Cooper, authors of the new book that's getting ready to come out called eBooks 101, The Digital Content Strategy for Reaching Customers Anywhere, Anytime, on any device. And if you send an email today to moreinfo@rockley.com, that's moreinfo@rockley.com, and include in the subject line free copy of eBooks 101, they'll give you a free copy before it goes on sale of the digital book. And I'm not sure of the formats yet, but I'm sure you'll get an email from them shortly before the book goes to market, which will probably be in the next month or so. So what a great thing. And I've read the book. It's excellent. I was an editor on it. So I hope you'll all take advantage of that. And for whatever we can't cover in the webinar today, will certainly be covered in the book. A few housekeeping items. Don and I are going to talk for about 40 minutes and then take some questions. Now, that's usually the format. I think today I'll probably dive into the topic and try to answer the question as the guest, and then I'll let Don field a bunch of questions that he had already submitted to me, along with questions that were submitted in advance by people who were unable to attend the webinar today but contacted us via email. If you'd like to submit questions while we're online, please do so using the GoToWebinar control panel, the chat functionality, and you can submit a question there. Those questions will be gathered up by the producers from Data Conversion Laboratory and put into a text file and sent to both Don and I after the webinar. We'll answer those questions to the best of our ability and provide you with any kind of links to useful resources that might help you, and we'll publish those as a blog post shortly after the 4th of July holiday on the Data Conversion Laboratory website or blog. So anybody who's registered will contact you afterward to let you know where that is. Also, if you are experiencing technical challenges of any sort, you can use the chat window to try to get somebody's attention. We have some producers working with us that can try to guide you. If for some reason you cannot participate fully or you have to leave early today, remember, don't fret. We've got a recording going on, and we'll send to everyone who registered a link to the recorded archive of the webinar so you can listen to it later, or if you'd like to share it with somebody, that also comes in handy. So I'm Scott Abel, the Content Wrangler. I'm a lot of things. I've been involved in XML publishing, which is why I'm on this webinar as a guest today. And I work closely with both vendors of XML publishing products and also customers that are clients of mine who are trying to move toward an XML publishing strategy. And increasingly, I'm working with publishers in the ebook space, and that doesn't necessarily mean traditional publishers, such as book publishers. It certainly includes them, but it also means anyone that makes any kind of content that might be packaged in an ebook for convenience or some kind of better preparation, better usefulness to the end user customer. If you want to tweet about this and include my name, you can use the @ and Scott Abel. So I'll just try to run through some slides really quickly to set the stage for this, and then let Don tackle the interview questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. So today's question is really, why do publishers need a formal strategy to develop ebooks. And I think the short answer is we just can't keep doing things the way that we've been doing them. Now, when I say we, I'm pretty much talking to the traditional publishing industry, although anyone who creates content today is a publisher. And so there are different degrees of problematic situations that exist in each kind of organization based on the kind of content that they create and the current processes they use to create, manage, and deliver it. Traditional publishers, though, in my view, still think they're creating books. And so these books are created one-off, much like automobiles used to be created before Henry Ford invented the kind of modular parts mentality that kind of stoked the world of automation and allowed there to be factories to create cars faster in a production line. So I think that we should be in the business of content production more than we should be in creating deliverables like books. And so I think that XML helps us get there, and I'll explain why. But I think when we are looking at developing a strategy, we want to accomplish some goals, and one of them is to eliminate waste. And certainly the old school manual approaches that we use today can be streamlined in many ways, and that would give us a little extra time. But we can also use XML to create derivative products that would be very interesting, and I'll explain how the car analogy relates to that. These interesting new products that can be kind of reconfigured from existing content assets can bring in revenue. So on an ROI, or return on investment equation, I look at both saving money by eliminating wastefulness and increasing revenue by developing new products and new markets. So it's an old idea creating this reusable components. Henry Ford, as I mentioned, started it. And this, reconfiguring of content by wrapping it in XML and making little reusable chunks that have semantic metadata attached to it allows machines to help us move the content around and do things better, faster, cheaper, and maybe even more innovatively. The great example for today is that this reconfiguring of existing components is still happening in the automobile industry despite it being 100 years after Henry Ford. Look at the Wrangler. It is a Ford truck. It's been around for a long time. But if you reconfigure the parts and you add some new, unique components to it, you end up with a new product called the T6, which I don't believe is marketed in the United States, but is actually in other places around the world for whatever reason that Ford determined. But if you look at it, the structure of the vehicle is the same. Many of the parts are the same. So this allowed Ford to quickly ramp up and create a new product based at first on the reusable components from the Ranger. When they added unique things to make this vehicle different, they created a new derivative or a new product. And we can borrow from this when we create content, especially ebooks. We can take the components of content that we use to create traditional deliverables, be they technical documentation or training or a book, a textbook, a narrative book, any kind of book, and we can then add unique things to make that product, that new information product, more valuable. And I guess you can gain both productivity gains and then revenue opportunities by doing so. So a few definitions. We all know that these kinds of words can, without a common vocabulary, can cause some consternation as everybody's listening. So let's start with a few. First, what is XML? It's extensible markup language. If you are new to XML, I recommend that you do a Google search and look for w3schools.org. And they have a great XML tutorial there that can teach you what it is. Basically, it's a markup language that allows us to add semantics or add metadata to the content that we create so that machines and humans can understand it. But more importantly, so machines can do things with it faster for us. They can automatically format the information, sort it, filter it, compare it, deliver it to multiple devices. It is an in-depth topic, XML, that we could talk ad nauseum about. But in the world of publishing, XML is a critical component, I believe, to successfully delivering content quickly. So what is an ebook? If you look at the definition here, and this is from the book that I promoted earlier today that you'll all receive a copy of, an ebook is an electronic book. It may be a digitized form of a bound book or be an electronic-only book, which means that it may be only created online and it's just meant to be consumed on a digital device reader of some sort. It's just a representation of a book. And, you know, that might be useful, but it's not all that exciting. But enhanced ebooks and ebook apps, they actually are more than just text and graphics. So ebooks, at their basic, are text and graphics that can be displayed on readers, tablets, personal computers, all kinds of mobile devices. But I think the excitement comes in when we start to talk about the new functionality. So reading Winnie the Pooh in its pure form on an iPad or any other kind of reader is perhaps useful, but it's not all that innovative. Enhanced ebooks, though, they include things like audio and video and links to internal content and external content. They can help you jump around the book and learn things that you might not be able to learn otherwise. Ebook apps, a different kind of ebooks, are software applications. They look like and act like books or ebooks, but they're actually an interactive experience. That keyword interaction is one of the components of the strategy we have to think about as we move toward XML, or as we take XML the next step forward. What will we do? What will we make interactive? What does that mean? What kinds of skills will we need our staff to have in order to do these things? And then we'll need to know about formats. What is a PDF? Well, a PDF stands for Portable Document Format. We've probably all encountered them. Many of us have created them. And in the early days, I would say in the 90s, they were the most exciting thing. We could package our content in these mysterious documents that allowed us to maintain the integrity of the look and feel. And we could search the documents later on and find the content inside. So it was very useful. We would give our customers everything and say, here's everything we know about this subject. You can search and find it. But today, PDF actually supports reflowable text, which means that depending on the device that you're viewing a PDF saved as an ebook file on, the integrity of the file will remain basically the same, but the text will reflow. So that's important because we've got page sizes and screen sizes to address now. It's no longer will the consumer open a PDF and print it out later, or onto A4 paper or 8.5 by 11 paper. Now it's like, what will happen if they open it on an iPhone or an Android versus an iPad? Will they resize it? Will they have to use the functionality of the phone to actually enlarge the text to make it large enough to view? These are all things that we have to think about as we decide what formats to support. There's also the EPUB format, which they do relate to one another, but there are some specific differences that you would need to know if you were going to create ebooks for production and port them to multiple devices. So for instance, there are things that the Kindle does not support, and one of them is the EPUB standard, which is ironic. But there are also things that both formats support. And then there's Apple. Apple has their own thing called the fixed width layout format, which is kind of like a PDF for the iPad and the iPhone that keeps the integrity of the look and feel of the document. These are all things we have to consider. And we have to ask ourselves, is look and feel important when you're considering this? And if you're moving toward the iPad, and that's part of the market, and it is the biggest selling part of the market, the most revenue is made from Apple, regardless of what people think about the company, look and feel is important to some organizations. And we're taking a guess, and it is a guess, by the way, there's no science behind this yet, that in keeping the integrity of the look and feel of a coffee table book or a magazine or a travel journal is important on an iPad. We'll have to wait and see whether that pans out, whether we should be making identical photocopies for use on a device and then enhancing them to make them more valuable. And then the rest of the world. The world is full of mobile phones. There are mobile phones everywhere, but there are issues with broadband, bandwidth, Wi-Fi. Do we know how many phones they have, what the resolution is, what size is the screen? Does it matter? And it does matter if you're trying to reach a global audience. Which tablets will you support? What functionality? There's a difference between a tablet device and an e-reader. A tablet is more like a computer. An e-reader is more a single-use device, although they're certainly providing functionality to enhance them. But this is an e-reader. It's a typical e-reader. It's the Sony reader. On the left is the Amazon Kindle that many of you may have. And then there's the Nook on the right, which is a color device. Each one has different functionality, supports different standards, and so therefore we're going to have all of this problem with multi-channel delivery to multi-device types. And so again, trying to do this one-off and make a version for every one of these would be time-consuming, wasteful, and inefficient. Where will you sell the books? That matters too, because the format that you put the book in may exclude the book from certain markets. And when I talk about markets, I mean marketplaces like Amazon.com or the iBook store. Those are places that you can put content, even if it's free content that's marketing material for your company. It doesn't have to be a book that you sell. There are places that already have audience, and you're going to need to think about where will we put the content, what will the requirements be for that particular shopping mall. So the missing ingredient in all this is strategy. And I'll help you out with this. The real definition of strategy is how will you plan to spend your money and allocate the resources that you have to accomplish your goal. Inherent in that is knowing what your goal is. These are things that XML publishing strategy is not. They're all important. Editing, copywriting, all these different things, the tools that you use, the management structure, how you'll manage your projects, whether or not your output will be fabulous, whether it will be designed well. But these are all not part of strategy. They're all part of kind of the big picture of what we're going to do. So strategy is basically an alternative that you choose to make happen your goal. It's to help you achieve something. It's usually a solution to a problem, but it could just be reaching toward a new goal, being better than you are today. If you're the biggest seller of books today or the biggest medical device company, maybe you want to continue being that. And maybe that's not a problem, it's just a goal. So you can use strategic planning to make decisions to allocate your resources so that you can pursue the things that you want to define as success. An XML publishing strategy is something that can help you get there, I believe, because it's repeatable, it's systematic. It doesn't have to do with what I think or what I feel. It doesn't matter that there's a tool in the way. The strategy has nothing to do with that. You have to move people out of the equation when you start to think about the strategy or your goal. Then you move people back in to say, how can we use the people to help us get there? But people use tools, whether they use hammers to build houses or scalpels when they're doing surgery. They use different kinds of tools, and so content management systems, authoring tools, and other kinds of software are going to enter the mix as well. So Rahel Bailey, who's a content strategy guru, many of you may know from the technical communication industry, she has a great statement that I think is indicative and food for thought as we think about this concept today, which is strategy is often lost upon those who think in terms of deliverables. And I couldn't agree more. You can't worry about what the end product is. You have to think about what your goal is. And then the end products are part of the production to help you reach your goal. It's a fine line, but it's an important one. So to reiterate, it's about strategic planning is really about what are you going to do with the money and the people that you have. Now, in order to have the people, most of the time you have to have money. So it is about the money, other people's money, probably not yours. If you're a small independent publisher, maybe it is yours. If you're a self-publisher, maybe it is yours. But in that case, an XML strategy may or may not be good. Really, XML helps us tackle these big problems, content-heavy organizations with way too much content, way too many opportunities, not enough resources to get there using the traditional methods. So I'd like to ask, if you are not already using XML publishing, would you consider trying to do something better, cheaper, faster if it was your money? And if the answer is yes, then you owe it to try to kind of figure out how could you help your company get there. So we've got questions. Don submitted a lot of questions, and then I've got questions from the audience, and I've created some slides for them. So Don, are you still on the line?
Yes, sir, I am.
Well, let's have a chat then and see what we can come up with. And I want you to kind of drill me. Don and I have had experience doing debates. So sometimes we disagree on a topic, but I think today we're just trying to help everybody understand the need for a formal XML strategy.
Absolutely, Scott. And most of these questions were questions that were asked in advance by people that could not be here, so they did not see the benefit of they did not benefit from seeing the presentation. So some of these may be redundant, but maybe they're good questions that need to be repeated. And the first one was someone had asked about converting a back catalog. and obviously humans have been writing books for a long, long, long time. Is that part of an XML strategy?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question. I think when we're talking back catalog, that's a really publishing-oriented word. So for those of you not in the publishing industry, you could probably imagine what a back catalog is, but we often call that legacy content. Content that's probably unstructured, that has been created before we decided to take a new approach. Actually, probably before the advent of the iPad that started to change the publishing industry and also changing what people expect. So there's this concept called the long tail, which Chris Anderson from Wired Magazine, who's also an author of some great books on the subject, has been touting for a long time. And that is this whole idea that there are legacy pieces of content that are valuable. They may not be the whole book. There may be something inside of a book, for example, that could be reused by somebody in a new book. And that these publishing companies in particular, just like organizations, pharmaceutical companies, airlines, they own these pieces of content, not the writers who created them, right? The company owns them. They're corporate assets that are not being leveraged. And so the answer to the question is sometimes there could be huge value potential in separating your initiative, some group going backwards to prioritize which content has a likelihood of being reused in other places. Maybe inside of your organization to create new products. You already own, let's say, an X-ray for tennis elbow. And if you're a medical publisher, you may be creating a new product that has to do with X-rays or teaching students about fractures or whatever these kind of things are that are medical oriented. And you may be able to go back in your library and borrow some of those pieces. And in the case where you've got an agreement in place to license that content, you'll also have to address licensing issues, so it's not just technology. However, I would imagine that people that took the photograph 10 or 20 years ago probably aren't making any royalties today. So they would be happy if they started making royalties in a new way. So there's great potential in the legacy content, both internally and externally, to create new products. Whether or not it's part of your strategy has to do with your goal. If you're developing new markets and you're going to kill off your print, maybe not. If you're going to move that print and you don't want to lose it into the electronic archive so that you have access to it, maybe yes. You can kill two birds with one stone. So I think it's a really interesting question, and I think that that conversion of that legacy content is the kind of thing that DCL does. But Don, you could probably address this as well. I have said that the automation of conversion is really important because it helps us get there faster. But it's not the complete process. The computer doesn't know exactly what all the pieces are. So how do you combine the process of using a computer to convert the content with a human to augment it and make it into what it should be so that we can actually benefit from it?
Well, Scott, you're absolutely right. And we see the highest value is combining, and value I determine is how much getting as much good as you can for the lowest amount of price, and price is obviously a huge issue. But combining computers, because my computers work very, very cheap, with a human editorial aspect to go get content that is exactly the way that it needs to be to go do with it what you need to go do with it. So it certainly, automation is very important. Human editing is very important, and one without the other is a hamburger without French fries. So.
Yeah, exactly. Again, it's that less than desirable results. Now, I know we wanted to also talk about this topic, so go ahead and post the question.
You know, money is always an issue, and if you go create a new stream called eBooks, is that going to go cannibalize your print books? Can XML strategy help with that? How do you avoid cannibalization?
So you can see here that I use kind of the Pac-Man analogy, and on the left it says it's inevitable and irrelevant. And I think that's partially true. It is inevitable. You are going to lose some people from that particular process because they like making the move to electronic for whatever reason. Just like there are people who say, oh, I love my books, I would never give my books up. I loved my computer too, and I gave it up for a laptop, and I loved my laptop, and I gave it up for an iPad. There are probably people that like the typewriter. I think it's nonsense to think that people will not move from one product line to another, but does that mean that you won't make less money? That's the important thing. And if you're creating enhanced eBooks that offer more value than a print publication, you can charge more for it. And there's a lot of nonsense going on about ebooks should be cheaper because. Ebooks should not be cheaper because. There is no because unless they suck. If they suck, they should be cheaper, right? This is the law of economics. If the product is not as good, maybe you pay a little less for it because it's kind of mediocre, right? But if it's really good, you're going to be able to charge a premium dollar for it, and you're going to be able to reap profits from it. Now, there may be instances where you make your content really good, your enhanced ebooks, for example, and you don't charge for it. Maybe it's part of a product like technical documentation. But in that case, what you're getting is the benefit of providing superior customer experience. And in that case, it makes this argument irrelevant, right? We hope that they cannibalize the print production so we can stop making manuals, so we can stop making CDs, so we can stop making PDFs. Maybe we have to keep them as an archive or something, but we can start making them less available. And one only needs to look back to 15 years ago to see that we used to make 3 hole punched binders full of paper documentation, and then eventually we moved to CD, and eventually we moved to PDF, and eventually we moved to the web. So I think it's inevitable. But the trick is to create multiple markets with the same content, I believe. And publishers in particular could make tremendous strides by recombining and repackaging all the content they have from different company silos. Many publishing companies also own or are owned by media companies. So if they weren't so siloed, maybe they could borrow a company recordings or music, company from a movie or television studio that they also own or are partners with. So I think there are many opportunities to actually create better content that would, yes, cannibalize part of the market, but enhance it and allow them to make more money or provide better service. And the great example, I'll just show this slide really quickly. I inserted this, Don, without your knowledge, so here's a surprise slide, which I know you don't expect that from me. But the greatest example, I think, is the bank machine. In 1960s, Chemical Bank introduced this, and the banking industry declared it was the demise of the teller. And yet, I was inside of the bank talking to a teller yesterday. So we know that's not true. Now, cannibalization can not necessarily have to occur, and when it does, it's only a special market. I don't like to use the ATM for certain functionality because the benefit is not there. If I deposit money in an ATM, for example, they don't harvest the money out of the machine until the next day or whenever it is, and then they declare that as a deposit the following day. Whereas if I walk into the bank, they actually deposit the money the minute that I give them the check or the cash. So to me, there's a benefit. So that's the kind of example I'm after, is that if we can provide exceptional service or some differentiating factor, we don't have to lose out. We can have the technology augment what we currently offer in the book department.
So Scott, can I throw you a curveball since you threw one at me?
Sure.
Why don't we've got half a dozen questions stacked up. Why don't we maybe alternate between the audience questions and the pre-submitted questions? Is that good, so that we sure that we get to the ones that our audience is asking?
If you've got a few of them ready and you can throw them at me, we've got 30 minutes. Let's go.
Let's get it. So this was more of a statement, and I'm going to ask you agree or disagree. And the question, or the statement is, regarding content, and David asked this, regarding content as an asset means that the workflow, distribution, and access become part of the content, or something like that. Agree or disagree?
Oh, sure. I think the simple definition, and anybody who's followed me for the last 10 years knows that I repeat this every day, and that is content is a business asset worthy of being managed efficiently and effectively. And if the question asker agrees with that, then of course that makes perfect sense. If you value that content as an asset that you would keep track of, just like components in an automobile factory that are used to make things like carburetors, that are used to make things like trucks, SUVs, and cars, then of course we're going to keep track of them. We're going to workflow route them so that they go to the right people that need them at the time that they need them, not 3 weeks later. They're not going to be emailing them an alert that they'll miss that then will cause another delay. They're going to be just-in-time delivery. They're working to make a lean, mean publishing machine.
Great. So we'll pick that with the next question, which was a pre-submitted one. Do we really need XML publishing to create ebooks?
Oh, no. Not if you're making a church cookbook, no, you probably don't need it. If you're a small publisher and you're just making 5 titles, probably not. But what happens when you make 50? What happens when your small publishing company actually starts selling a lot of ebooks because you find a way to do that, whatever that way might be, leveraging self-publishing through lulu.com, which is a service that you might want to check out, which helps publishers make printed books when they need them. Maybe you use iTunes and the iBook store and Amazon.com, and all of a sudden you have a hot property and you make a lot of money. Then you want to have more books and you want to have more money. And then you have to hire more staff, and before long you're emailing things, you're doing the same old stuff that technical writers know. We know from 10 years ago that are not the right things to do, right? You introduce all these things that slow the process down. So if you really want to streamline your process, and that's the whole content life cycle, from the minute that you start to create something or even think about creating it and decide you will, until the minute that is delivered to the customer and maybe even archived, destroyed, or whatever your process is to kind of end the life of that product or bring it back to the beginning and start all over. Those are part of the content life cycle, and if you are looking to actually be professional, I mean, I really hate to insult people, but if you're not using XML and content management and getting rid of manual tasks that humans are not efficient at performing, then you are not really acting all that professional. And I think the real kind of question is, would you, I joked about Girl Scout cookies. Would you need a factory to make Girl Scout cookies? No. But when you have millions of Girl Scout cookies, yes, hell yes, you need a factory, and it needs to be automated, and it's a process. And so what you do is you map out your current process, and you look for all these weak points, and you use XML, other standards, and technology to help get back that time that you lost by growing. As you grew and grew and grew, so did all the wastefulness. And if you can get back that time, you can use it for innovation.
Very good. So another question from the audience, Scott. This one comes from Jason. He asks, do we incorporate XML-based workflows and new software workflow into existing production and editorial teams, or can you just add another layer of new technical staff to go manage these tools?
That's a yes and no question. I hate to be wishy-washy on that. It really depends on your situation, and it's not a strategic question. That's really an implementation question, and that's different than strategy. The strategy, I think, is what we're trying to focus on today. So I want to say yes. You could take either approach, but it's kind of a post-strategy question.
Okay. So here's our next question that was pre-submitted. Are organizations providing training materials as ebooks?
Yes, and they're doing a dismal job at it. In fact, the market is so flooded that if you search for ebooks on the web, just on the web, and keep in mind, we've used that term ebook a long time ago when we had email. I think some people just automatically started saying ebooks, and this was long before the popularity of any kind of devices that were associated with that term. And so in the old school days and today, save as PDF is called an ebook, and to that I say nonsense. That's a digital photocopy. It's nothing useful. It doesn't add any kind of special powers. Now, that doesn't mean that you always need something special or something interactive in order to learn something, but oftentimes you do. So if we go back to kind of Edward Tufte, who T-U-F-T-E, for those of you who are searching Google later for Edward Tufte, you'll want to search for information visualization. This is kind of a great example of there are different ways to display data that humans can consume it quickly. And if you give somebody an Excel spreadsheet of 10,000 items, whatever they are, and you start scrolling through them page by page, we just can't remember it. We can't sort it and make pie charts in our head. We can't decide what's important and what's not. We can go through with a highlighter and highlight everything and then create another spreadsheet and waste a bunch of time, but that's not efficient or effective. And so the analogy is that ebooks should provide something that, when it's training, that teaches people. And in order to do that, ebooks have to become a hybrid between training content or e-learning and a book. And so they need to be interactive oftentimes. They'll probably need to show instead of tell, but they may also have to have text in them so that search engines can find the content. Because just putting a video in might be useful if you're on the page in an ebook and you press the button, then you can consume the content. But how will you even know that the video is in there? How will you know what you will learn from the video if there's not a script? So I think, yes, is the answer. They are creating it, and they're just not doing a good job for the most part. But that will change because user expectations will force it.
Okay. Well, the next audience question comes all the way from, believe it or not, Kenya. Agatha asks, or says, my biggest challenge right now is I have loads of print books that I have recently acquired. They have no soft copies of any kind. How do I get them to market as ebooks in a faster and cheaper way?
Wow. I think it depends on how many. You know, when you're talking to vendors, and Don, you'll have to answer this question from a DCL perspective, but many software vendors are in the market to target large corporations, and it just makes sense. They're trying to get millions of document conversion dollars to, you know, handle all this legacy content that exists inside the typical organization. This is companies that have 1,000 employees or so. And so when we're thinking about 1,000 employees, think of all the handbooks and manuals and training and sales material, marketing collateral, and all the things that you use, all the things that run a company. That content also might be better prepared and better saved as an ebook. And so there's that. There's probably a lot of niche products out there that are aiming at small publishers, and I'm assuming that our Kenyan friend is a small publisher. When you think of Random House and Wiley, and then compare to that person. And in that case, Don, what is the solution? I mean, do you know of other tools that they can use that are on the fly conversion, and then they can augment it themselves, or do they really need to seek out the help of somebody to assist them?
Well, and Scott, just for that kind of situation, we have launched a service called Books to Bytes that allows people to, on a very small scale, go convert the one-offs and get them in XML and get them in a format, and it's specifically aimed at the small organization, not the huge organizations.
Excellent, and I didn't even know that, so thanks for sharing that with me. You'll have to send me, what's the URL for that?
You know, I don't know it off the top of my head, but I will. And speaking of what's the URL, some people had asked about the free offer with Ann's book, so we need to list that, and I will have that for you before the webinar ends, or certainly send it out in the post-webinar follow-up.
Excellent, and we'll be touching base on the free offer for an ebook here in just a minute. So let's go to the next question.
And so this is one that, you know, as you talked about, going from what I'll call page turners to the embedded interviews. I was at a conference a couple weeks ago where they showed 3D graphics that the end user can use in technical documentation to rotate apart. Do you think customers expect multimedia in an ebook?
Hell yeah. I think it takes a little while, though. I mean, I think you know I'm pretty opinionated on this subject, and that's because when I've got great examples. I mean, I put a quote up here from Laura McPhee. She's a friend of mine in Indiana who is the editor currently and actually leaving to go to France to another job. But she's the editor currently of Nouveau News Weekly, and she shared with me while in California recently her excitement at getting an iPad, only to discover that all the books that she downloaded as quickly as she could and then moved on to another task. Later, she went back to revisit and open the books, and she was disappointed. Why? Because they're electronic photocopies of the same stuff she already has. So if convenience of having them on a device and being able to throw away all the books from your bookshelf because you're not a book collector, that might be useful, really. I mean, I got rid of a lot of old records, and I kept some vinyl because I like it. I got rid of some CDs because it was hogging up space. I did the same thing with VHS movies as I moved to new technology, and now I have them all digitally. But when you start to use the devices, especially the iPad, which of course is changing user expectations every day of what's possible, you start to really feel interested in the technology. You touch it, it does something for you, right? It's doing a service. It's providing a service to you. It's not just bells and whistles. And so then you start to wonder, as most humans do, why doesn't this book work the same way? Why are they making me read how to install this particular thing onto my dishwasher? Why are they making me read how to assemble an IKEA shelving unit that could more easily be communicated with a video? Why? And so, yeah, the answer to your question is kind of, if they're not already, they will be, and it's just going to get worse for publishers who do provide a poor experience.
Very cool. So I will follow up on the previous. I had mentioned a URL for Books to Bytes, but a one-off conversion, and my crack staff back in New York have told me it is Books, B-O-O-K-S, the number 2, and then Bytes, B-Y-T-E-S.com. And we'll send that out in the follow-up email. Here's another question from David. David asks, why are indexes not included more often and linked as well? searching is not a substitute for a good index.
Actually, searching is a perfectly good substitute for an index. An index is a legacy product of a book. There's absolutely no reason, unless you're using an old school book paradigm, that you need an index. Now, keep in mind that you have to provide the content in the way that the devices can use. These devices can't even remember when you click on a hypertext link and go to another page to put in a back button, because it's not a web browser. And yet our experience using computers is browsing the web. So anything that is akin to browsing the web is going to naturally be easily adopted by people because we already are familiar with how the web works. No one invented a cell phone like the iPhone and then changed the way the phone dialing process worked, right? They had to make things better. They had to remember the phone numbers for us. They had to automatically add them to our phone directory. They had to allow us to add a picture of the person, a customized ring. These are all enhancements that add value. An index is just not part of it. Now, is indexing the content so that a search engine can find this valuable? I believe so. Is indexing the content so that a printed version of the same thing? Now, I have an iPad, and I actually print from my iPad. So right there, that goes to show you that the content of a digital consumer like me sometimes ends up being printed. In that case, when I select that option, I should be able to have an index if I need it, so that I can flip through the pages of a printed copy faster. But really, I just don't see the value. The utility is not there.
All right, the next pre-submitted question, and Scott, you'll remember this from our pro and con discussion in Washington a few years ago. When does implementing a content management system become part of a strategy?
And you know, we never touched on this during our debate. We talked really about whether we need one or not, a content management system in XML. But I thought this would resonate with you, Don, because to me, a Blender is like a content management system, and the Salsa, which I know you're fond of. I've received jars of it from you, so I know that you're a connoisseur. But the salsa is like the product that you can generate from a blender. But you could also blend that salsa up and create a juice. And if you pureed it and added some other components, let's say vodka and some spices, you might have a Bloody Mary. You could make a gazpacho, right? Just with the same ingredients. You can do all kinds of things with the tool. So I think that the important thing to realize here is that this has nothing to do with how you allocate your money and your resources. It's not part of reaching your goal. It's a tool that helps you to perform some functions that might help you get to your goal. So it's really not part of the strategy.
Right. So another question from the audience. Clint asked, if you're starting from no XML, what would be step one?
Step one, unstructured content. We need to take a look at your content and do an evaluation of the content, kind of an analysis. The Rockley Group, ROCKLEY.com, specializes in this. You basically are taking a peek at the content to see how do you do it today? How is it structured today? Compare all the different products that you create, information products. If you create user manuals and training materials and quick start guides and frequently asked questions on your website, you want to find out whether or not some of that content is reusable, whether it could be reusable, whether it is being reused today is not the same as whether it could be reused tomorrow. And then you want to ask yourself questions about the content. What are we trying to do with the content to reach our goal? How will the content help us reach our goal? And then that helps you to kind of map out and prioritize what kinds of content would need to be structured in XML and therefore created that way in the future. It also will help you prioritize what content from the past that's already been created will need to go back and be converted by a company like Don's Data Conversion Laboratory and then augmented with metadata by humans. It also helps you decide what tools you need. The granularity of the content is most important. Content management systems in general do not do well with content because there are so many of them, and we make decisions to select a certain tool often for reasons that befuddle me. Usually they have nothing to do with the goal. It's always that something stupid like we already own SharePoint, so therefore that's our tool. Well, I already have a hammer, so when I put that screw into something, I'll just beat it in there with a hammer, right? It's just silly for us to do it, but we do. So I think that's the first step, is analyzing your content, taking a look at the processes that you use to create, manage, and deliver it, and then asking yourself questions, what do I need to do to streamline this to make my goal achievable?
All right, another question from the audience, I believe, is due up next, and this one comes from Michael, and it says, we're discussing eBooks as the holy grail. However, we have found other formats like HTML5 more open on different formats. Is there something that I'm missing in the ebook, or is it just the common term for *ML?
No, you're not missing anything. HTML5, for those of you who do not know, is commonly thought of as a kind of, I don't know, let's see, the Hatfields and McCoys. If you use that, it's the Flash versus HTML5. HTML5 is about rendering content, and it has, which is the HTML language itself is about what does the content look like in a web browser. It helps it control the display, the look and feel. HTML5 adds all kinds of enhancements about that allow content to have movement, to perform tasks, to do other things. But I think there's a bigger discussion here, and that is really what will users want? I think users, by and large, don't care about HTML or Flash or eBooks. They care about the end deliverable. How can I find a sushi restaurant, right? If you can help me do that because you have a phone device that I can type in sushi and you magically give me directions there, I might want that. And if it's powered by HTML5, I might not care. Whether or not I read a book in a web browser or I read a book in an ebook format that's in an ebook reader or a tablet device or a cell phone or a smartphone, I don't know. I have no idea. These are user preference questions, and I think you're going to see a convergence of all these technologies, and everything will become basically enhanced and interactive and dynamic.
Okay, our next one we were maybe talked about legacy content again, and you've got the slide up on the screen.
Yeah, I like this one because, and I'm not temping out Wiley Custom Select. There were many others. There were some that were better, in fact, and more aggressive at this approach in the past, and then they had their demise, which was ironic. It makes you wonder sometimes if sometimes our technological solutions are ahead of the curve, ahead of the audience before there's a market. In this case, this is Wiley Custom Select. It's basically some legacy content and some new content that is combined in a repository that allows professors and other people concerned with creating their own custom textbooks to do so legally. In the past, I think it was the 1980s, sometimes maybe the mid-80s, Kinko's, which is now FedEx Kinko's, was sued, and I believe they lost a large multi-million-dollar lawsuit, a very expensive one, for promoting the idea that college professors should be able to accumulate bunches of resources from existing textbooks, photocopy them, give them to Kinko's, so Kinko's would basically provide them in a new package. They would make a book of all the different components of content that the professor was basically stealing from copyrighted and perhaps not copyrighted works. They could also, of course, include their own content. Maybe they had spreadsheets or graphics or illustrations or text that they created. And then Kinko's would inventory those at the college locations of their stores, and then the students would be able to go in and buy it. Now, this is a great benefit to students because instead of having to buy 6 textbooks for one class and hear the professor of your $175 textbook say, that one we're only going to read chapter 6, and then you wonder, why did I buy $600 worth of books for this class? They were paying on average, I think, $70, $50 for some class materials, and so that was a great benefit. But unfortunately, it was stealing, and there was a copyright violation. So XML publishing can also help us to take the legacy content, break them into components, and make them available through an interface, like Wiley Custom Select and others, that would allow people like professors, maybe even consumers, because it's a computer content management system behind it, we know which pieces of content were used in the deliverables, so we can assign a price and a value to them. Therefore, we can also pay royalties to the people whose content was used legitimately, and often create new revenue sources for those individuals and companies that own that content that are not being purchased today because maybe the book is too old, or maybe students are revolting and just not going to pay for all the books all the time anymore. But if you use this example internally, and if you use maybe music as an example, this is a mashup. So when you make a music, song, a Lady Gaga production or Rolling Stones or whatever example you want to use, all the content is actually created in isolation. Like the drummer may be drumming in one room in a studio, and then the backup vocalists are singing someplace else on a totally different day. And all these recordings are brought together and they're mixed into the final output. And so we use our psychic power as music producers to decide this is the rendition we want to record and duplicate and sell. But mashup artists take pieces of music, including things that they steal because they can't buy them legitimately, and things that they can purchase legally, and they weave them together into a new product. And if we created a marketplace for those new products, let's say an iTunes Central for mashup artists, and we were licensing those individual pieces, and let's say iTunes, you could buy a Rolling Stones song for 99 cents, but you could buy the enhanced version, which includes all the tracks separated out, the drum track, the bass, the violins, the backup singers, the vocals. Then you could remix them, and you could legally purchase them and create new products that they could then sell. And then the royalties would be given to everybody downstream, including the mashup artist. So if we think of our content this way, you can easily see that an XML publishing approach would allow us to skin an interface over top of the database and allow our customers to remix our content in a way that's desirable to them.
All right, Scott, I've got Mickey's big hand creeping past the 10, so why don't we go into kind of rapid fire mode? Stephen asked the question, can an ebook be made context sensitive and therefore replace a chum file for online help?
I think the answer to that question is yes, but I don't know that you would want to do that. And the reason that I say that is, well, I guess you have to define online. I just gave an award to Apple for most innovative technical documentation and most innovative in-app, as in application, in software application documentation. And that's because their iPad app documentation is actually training. As you interact with the document itself, so if you open up the equivalent of Microsoft Word on an iPad, it's called Pages, created by Apple, and you open the documentation, it instructs you how to use it by teaching you how to touch the screen. So you actually perform the functions that they're teaching you, thereby avoiding the need for a separate file, right? You're actually interacting with the application, and the information that you need to do so is presented on the screen as part of the application. It's not a separate file. That being said, I don't see why you would need an ebook for that if you have HTML5. You might be able to create on the web a point-and-click module that would allow you to, let's say, search for a keyword or a problem on a customer support center and be able to pull up some context-sensitive help on the web. This is being done right now by a company called MindTouch, MINDTOUCH.com. They create socialized and very engaging customer support center content for myriad online companies. They're kind of innovative, and they're using the approach that you described, but without the ebook component.
Okay, and maybe one last slide before we kind of wrap things up. What are the human issues involved? I hear a lot that, you know, the technology is easy. It's the human side of things that makes it tough with a strategy.
Well, I'm not sure how many slides are left of the deck. We've got 5 minutes so far, so I'll go rapid fire, and if we can get to some more, we will. But basically, the biggest problem are people. Technology works. Conversion engines work. They don't convert everything. They never have promised to do so. XML works. You can, when you do it correctly, wrap your content in XML and give it semantic value, and you can, when you purchase the right content management system designed to handle XML component objects and then move them around in efficient, effective ways based on your goal, you can accomplish dynamic lights out publishing, dynamic personalized publishing. You can route it through via workflow and create globalized versions for multiple audiences and multiple languages. It's being done. This isn't even new. But people are the biggest obstacle. You know, even in companies that you would think are like some of the leaders in the world, and I won't name names this particular time and embarrass them, but even the companies that are the leaders in the world in many other disciplines are so not able to get past the cultural problems with people. It's a governance issue. It's a corporation's or an organization's cultural issue. And, you know, sometimes they fail because people get in the way. So we have to help people become less afraid. We have to have buy-in from the top that basically says this will occur, and you have to help us get there.
Okay, next slide talks about what I call the three-headed monster for delivery, and print from 20 years ago, web from 10 years ago, and ebook now. Is that the reality for the future?
I think that's not the reality for the future. I think the reality for the future is, can you help us create static, dynamic, and interactive content? And I say that because Condé Nast, under the leadership, Wired Magazine actually, under the leadership of Chris Anderson, started this revolution when he went to his staff and said, you all have to reapply for your job. And he's said this at several conferences, so I believe it's true. And there's been articles about how successful he is at this. And basically he said, you have to be able to do your job and create content in the traditional way for our published, printed publications. You also need to be able to help us create that content so that it's leveraged via the web. And in addition to that, it needs to be interactive. So if you're a print designer and all you know is about ink on paper, you need to get with the program and start thinking about movement. And what does that mean for usability? And how can I teach people, not just make them read things? How can I dazzle them with graphics that provide them information, not just look pretty? So I think we're going to see a big trend toward that, and you can look to Condé Nast to help drive it.
So how much of an ebook production process really can be automated?
Yeah, it's not really the ebook production process that can be automated. It's the content lifecycle. We look for all these opportunities to save time and money, and the first place we should look is outside the life cycle. How many times do you send an email to 8 people and try to get them to agree on a meeting only to have 15 different emails go back and forth between all of you about, I can't make the meeting, why are you inviting me to the meeting, oh, I forgot that I'm on vacation, can you do it Tuesday? Tuesday wasn't even an offer, right? We were offering a meeting on Friday. So we're so inefficient at so many things that if we can look for ways to streamline our tasks and let computers take over when it's better. So formatting content, saving it into multiple deliverables, uploading it automatically, when we're not there, routing information to other people who are awake and are working 24 hours a day, and maybe other nations. These are things that we're going to have to consider in order to get there.
Right. Scott, we want to wrap it up, and I don't know what time it is there, but I've got 2 minutes till the top of the hour.
We've got 2 minutes till the top of the hour, and I'll just run through these real quick and say the answer. So, professional, I've got a slide up right now that says professional societies versus traditional publishers. And so, yeah, the goals are sometimes different, but the American Society for Training and Development is currently doing the things that we're talking about. They've got their content in XML. They're using DITA, in fact, the Darwin Information Typing Architecture, and they will grow, and their case studies will help us learn things from the training development industry. I think there won't be a consolidation in the e-reader market. I think whatever Apple does will drive the market. It will change user expectations, and it's nice for us to also understand the difference between an e-reader and a tablet. And so there is who's done it the right way? Not very many people. I think that Chris Anderson at Wired Magazine is helping drive the market, and that the app kind of revolution is actually what's really most important for us to watch, because that's where the interaction is happening. O'Reilly Media is probably an anomaly. They've been using XML for a long time, and they're doing a really good job. So yeah, we are out of time. Wow, that was pretty fun. Don, did you have a good time?
I had a great time, Scott. Learned a lot of good questions, and very, very interesting insights.
So since we're out of time, I want to remind people that anybody who's on the call or anybody that you'd like to share this with actually can obtain a free copy of eBooks 101, the Digital Content Strategy for Reaching Customers Anywhere, Anytime, on Any Device by Ann Rockley and Charles Cooper by sending an email to moreinfo, MOREINFO, at Rockley, ROCKLEY.com. Make sure to put in the subject line that you want a free copy of eBooks 101. And I'm Scott Abel. I was glad to be here today. And if you need to contact me, you can do so certainly by sending an email to scottabel@mac.com. And this is Don Bridges. Thanks, Don.
Yeah,
I'm so glad we got a chance to do this.
Absolutely. It was great. And if anybody would like to have DCL talk with them about their content and go figure out, here's the landmines that you have buried in there, or boy, this looks pretty straightforward, or something in between, you can reach us at dclab.com or reach me at dbridges@dclab.com.
Excellent, and follow them on Twitter too. DCL Laboratory has some great DC Laboratory has some great content, and if you go to dcllab.com, you can also read their blog, and they've got some great articles up on the site that's really useful. So I'd like to thank them again as our sponsor, and the next webinar that they're producing is Wednesday, July 27th at 10 a.m. Converting to S1000D, what you need to know before, during, and after. And I'm sure that you'll be receiving an email invite to this as well. And until we meet again, thanks a lot for joining us. I appreciate it. I hope you learned something. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Scott.